Okay, great. This is Dana and Neil, and welcome to this complimentary webinar for you, What's Holding You Back from Recruiting. Neil and I have been in the direct selling world for many years, and our company, Team Connections, is a leadership and coaching company, and we are delighted to support direct selling leaders around the world. We were overjoyed with the number of people who've signed up, so if you are listening to this live or if you're listening to this into the recording, we just want to say thank you for being part of our community. This webinar really was born out of us listening, specifically asking, what do you need as direct sellers? And number one need that all of you said was, I really want to get better, not just at recruiting, but working with my team so that they're better for recruiting. So this free webinar is really for three kinds of people. Those who are on the webinar today and viewing and saying, I'm really struggling with recruiting, and I really need to find out what's holding me back. Those who have a modicum or are successful recruiters, but they're saying, you know, I'm not recruiting the number that I want. There might be something that's holding me back. And then also those successful leaders who are already recruiting, but they want a better understanding of what holds their team back. And so that's why we developed this 30 minutes, What's Holding You Back from Recruiting, and we are excited to share with you for the next few minutes.
The first thing I'd like to just say is that we have all sorts of things that we make available to people in direct sales, whether you're working for a company or have your own business. The best thing to do is to go to our website, www.teamconnections.org. There's a couple different things you can sign up for. One is that we have a blog, and there's usually 2 articles a week posted on there. Some of them are video blogs. We also put out a newsletter. And if you sign up on the website, you can also access a free audio recording that may be helpful. So we do all sorts of things through our website. So please go there and register so you can start to receive those items. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there's going to be a very special offer coming later today. So please hold with us to the end. We guarantee that we'll be done within 30 minutes, and we want to make sure that you have access to that offer. So our question is for today is, what is going to happen? And what our goal is to have you being able to identify what's holding you back from being the recruiter that you want to be. Now, if you're a leader, you maybe have already identified some of those things for yourself, and that's what leaders do, is they figure out what the issues are and how they can move past them. So this may be a great opportunity for you to hear of a different sort of framework that you can use to help the people on your team become better recruiters. So what's holding you back? That's what we're going to talk about today, particularly in terms of 3 areas. Dana?
Well, you know, recruiting isn't complicated, and I just want to say up front, I don't care if you call it recruiting or sponsoring, enrolling, or team building, whatever the language is, the concept of signing others up for your direct selling business is pretty much the same in every network marketing company and party plan company. It isn't complicated, but notice I didn't say it's easy. So to be successful, there are some things that you have to do, and these are great templates for you to be sure to teach every single member on your team. First of all, you have to ask, and that means you have to be interested in other people and finding out their needs. There's an old saying that it's much more important that you are interested than you are interesting. And unfortunately, because a lot of us in direct sales love to talk a lot, we end up talking about our opportunity, and we really don't ask enough questions of what other people need or are looking for. Second, you need to invite, and that is an important piece. None of us on this call want to be pushy people. And so inviting means that you're not inviting them to join you until you invite them to hear the nuts and bolts about your business. Or some people call it the facts about my business. Or some people say the meat and potatoes about our business. Inviting them to hear about what is involved in your company and what the opportunity could look like. Then there are 2 pieces that kind of go together. You're going to present those facts, and you're going to have a conversation and actually talk to people instead of just having this big presentation that is a one-size-fits-all. By conversing and by having a dialogue, you really start to find out if that person's a good fit for your company and if you're a good fit for them. And then next, you do that by answering their questions that they have about the business. But, you know, all of that requires listening, and many of us forget that that's a very important piece, that we're so busy talking that we overtalk and we don't ask and answer their questions. And then finally, a critical piece of recruiting is to teach others to do the same. There are people on this call who are great recruiters, but because they haven't stepped back and decided how to make themselves duplicatable, they never have quite the same recruiting that they do on your team. So as an overview, I would just say that in recruiting, it is not your job to convince others to sell your product. It's not your job to convince others to sell your product. Instead, it is your responsibility to invite enough people to hear about it that you find the right person. You find the person that's a good fit. You know, it's interesting. I put this picture of the can of soda on the webinar for a reason, is that when I was on Spirit Airlines not too long ago, and they charge you for everything, it's really pretty funny. But one of the things that they do is the flight attendant comes around and invites every single person to purchase a soda or a bottled water. And every single person, she asks. I was on another Spirit flight, and every single person, the guy asked, would you like to purchase a soda? It's not a big purchase, but would you like to purchase a soda, a beverage, a water? An interesting thing is that they didn't take it personally. I see our job in direct sales is very similar, that we're just inviting people to hear about it, to take some time and listen. And if they're a good fit, great. And if they're not a good fit, that's okay too. But, you know, the flight attendants don't take it personally when they're going through the cabin saying, would you like a soda? And I said, no, thank you. They don't say, oh, gosh, there must be something wrong with my soda, or, oh, no, this person hates me. No, that's just part of their job. And I think it's a great way for us to approach this. Now, many of you do this already, but you're still saying to yourself, gosh, you know what? I'm not sure that I'm doing these on a consistent basis. So Neil and I developed a bonus worksheet that you're going to receive at the end of this webinar absolutely free. It's a survey of things that you're going to be using day after day, week after week, to make sure that you keep this attitude and that you keep a recruiting culture in your particular organization. This bonus worksheet is not just for you, though. As a leader, you can certainly use it with your team, with your new and emerging leaders, to make sure that they say these are the pieces that are going to help them to be a better and more consistent recruiter. Neil. Neil, you're on mute.
So with that said, as an overview, these are the three basic areas that we're going to talk about today. Obviously, in 20-some minutes here, we can't do a complete job of talking about these things. But hopefully our goal is to give you some thought starters so that you can take this away and you can figure out how to change your recruiting behavior, how to change the behavior of your team, or even the individuals that are working with you. The three reasons are pretty simply what you see stenciled on the shirts here. The first reason is you're afraid. There's a fear factor when it comes to recruiting. Secondly, you don't know what to say. Sometimes our hearts are in the right place, but the words just won't come out of our mouth well. And so that's a second reason. We can't figure out what to say to people, and so we don't say anything. And the third reason why we don't engage in recruiting the way we want is we don't make time to work on recruiting. We know what to do. The fear factor is minimized, but we just can't seem to find the right time to build it into our schedule. Now this summer, during a 6-part series that we'll be doing on cracking the recruiting code, we're going to dig into these three topics in a lot more detail so that you can really build your own system of recruiting that's going to make you a fearless recruiter. But for right now, we're going to give you an overview of these that will help you get started on those topics. Right. So the first one is fear.
Well, many times we understand that we're afraid. We don't want to be pushy. We're afraid people won't like us. I don't want my friends to say, I'm that person. You hate the word no. You're not sure you know. You're afraid you won't find the right people. Maybe you might be a little bit afraid about too many people. And I've got an upcoming blog, if I haven't done it already, Neil, about saturation, that's really not a problem. But fear, and fear is a legitimate emotion. And this was something that really was difficult for me to understand as a leader. I thought, oh no, just get over the fear, just ignore the fear, push the fear down and just do it anyway. And yet then I would find that those people never became strong recruiters because we didn't address the truth in this emotion. They really were afraid people would think they were pushy. They really did hate the word no. They would say things like, I'm afraid people won't like me, or I'm afraid I don't know enough about my business, or I'm afraid my new people won't succeed, or I'm afraid I won't find the right people, or I'm afraid. And I want you to understand that these feelings are all about you. If you're afraid, those are legitimate feelings, but they're all centered about you. And our research shows that if you can deal with this fear and put it aside, recognize it as an emotion, but put it aside, you'll be a much more successful recruiter. Now this summer, we're going to teach you some specific techniques to keep you from being pushy, to help you have better word choices. But for right now, let's address this fear. If it's a legitimate feeling, that oftentimes what happens is that it is driving our feelings, are driving our actions. Now, is there anybody in this audience that says, yes, I want to be driven, I want to be led by fear. I don't want to lead by faith. I don't want to lead by making intelligent decisions. No. But yet, if we don't recognize that these are true feelings, we can easily let them change the way we think about recruiting, and that definitely changes what we do. And if we don't change this pattern, we can do more and more of the doing and doing interviews and picking up the phone and making ourselves do it. But because we've never addressed that, it's not going to change our results. So the real issue then is what you're thinking about. And if we can take the feelings and not be led by the feelings, but instead be led by what we think, then we're going to be a better recruiter. So here's what will happen. It's a shift to think first. And when you think first, you want to think about what you have to offer people. You want to think about your role in this process. Perhaps some of you might say, you know what, it's not my job to convince them to sell. My job is to tell enough people. So that will change the way you think about what you're doing. You know, it's not my job to make them like me. My job is just to offer this, and they're saying no to the opportunity. It's a different way of thinking, but if we start to change the way we think, that will change what we do, and ultimately, believe it or not, that changes our feelings. Because feelings, while they're legitimate, come and go. I can be sad today, but not sad tomorrow. I can be happy today, but by the end of the day, not be happy. Feelings come and go, and while they're legitimate, we need to address them. That's one of the reasons I told you the story about the airline attendant, because that person didn't run by feelings. That was their job. I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to offer this to everyone, whether they take it or not. And, you know, I don't have any attachment in the process. So that's the first thing that really is the reason that you or your people don't recruit more. And you'll want to spend some time thinking about how you can change starting with feeling to starting with thinking. So, Neil, you want to talk about the second one?
Yeah. This is the first one. I really think it's something that's, if we're just a little bit more mindful about what's going on, we can really address that issue. When we hold that fear in place, then we can think. And when we start to think, then we're going to be moving in the right direction. The fear starts to disappear. Well, the second topic is, I don't know what to say. This is where you want to talk to people, but you just haven't quite figured out what you're going to say to them that's going to get them to slow down and think about joining you in your direct sales business. So that's the next topic here. Now, there's a lot of places where you can find different things to say. The important thing is that to remember that there are no real magical words. What you have to do is you have to own the language that you're saying, and you can find those in your back office. Your company will provide you with some scripts or some sample conversations, or maybe just some questions to use to start to engage with people. You can read a lot on different blogs. Over the next month, we'll be having several entries there about recruiting, just to give you some idea of thought starters, words to say to start prospecting, words to say to start interviews. So that's the second place you can find it. Finally, the other thing you can do is to listen to successful recruiters. Talk with them and say, well, what do you do to start conversations? The important thing to remember about successful recruiters and what they have to say is that they own the language that they're saying. How do they own it? They say it again and again and again. Just like an athlete or a musician that practices, they practice daily. They sit there with their instrument. They go out and they do what they can to make sure that they're engaging in the activities that are going to be core to what they want to have happen. And that's what you can do as a recruiter too. Find ways to talk, to say these things out loud, and pretty soon you'll start to own these language. Now that may mean looking in a mirror, but you'll start to talk, and pretty soon you'll start to figure out what you need to say.
You know, the words to say, we're going to really do a deep dive on this summer, because Neil and I've heard often when we work with individuals, when we work with groups and companies, they say, boy, you guys have just great word choices. We just love your word choices. And so we didn't want to just leave you hanging and say, oh, well, you have to sign up. We want to give you some great word choices today. And one of the things that has really helped us over the years is to understand that, first of all, by listening, what makes people itch? What is their itch? And then if you scratch that itch, you are much more likely to find out if they're a good fit for you and if you're a good fit for them. But you have to listen. So when you're talking about income, rather than over-talking or overcompensating, and Neil, you told me this the other day, and I thought that was really true. You said a lot of the people that you work with who are beginning recruiters, they're not exactly sure what to say, so they overcompensate and they just tell everything about the opportunity. It's almost like a verbal vomit. You know, it's just like blah, 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 blah. And the person's like swimming with all these facts and thoughts, and you get into details. But by listening, there really are just 4 questions that people really do ask. These are the questions that most people want to know if they're going to hear about your opportunity. They want to know about the income, the time and the training, the cost, and how they get started. I mean, those really are the 4 basic questions. And if you're listening, you'll be able to find out which one of those is going to scratch their itch. So when you're talking about income, rather than just saying, well, you have to decide, what do you want when you want to recruit someone? Are you looking for a business builder, or are you looking just to have lots of bodies who are going to use your product and be consumers? Because you have to decide very clearly what you want, and that's the message that when you're using words to say. So if I'm talking about wanting to find people who are going to be business builders, I'm not going to say, oh, well, you can make a little money or you can make a lot of money, and it's all up to you, and I'm not going to be very vague. I'm going to use language that's going to talk about the average income of someone who works a consistent 20 hours in the business, or someone who works a consistent 40 hours in the business, or if they work on that level, what their business could look like in the next 12 to 18 months. So I think it's really important that as you craft language around income, that you're very careful that the language that you use is going to reflect what you're really looking for. So if you're in party plan and you say, oh, you can hold parties whenever you want, as many as you want, that's exactly what you're going to attract. If you're in party plan and you want somebody to be holding at least 2 parties a week, you say, the successful people on my team hold 2 parties a week, and this is how much money they make. If you are wanting to attract someone who does a number of appointments, and sells consistently, you don't start by saying, well, the minimum is the trailing 3 months of $1,000. You talk about my successful people hold 8 to 10 appointments a month. So you, in the income, you talk about the income that goes with those activities. The second is the time and training, and this, I think, is one that is a big pitfall. Be careful not to dilute the time and act like there is no time that it takes. Instead of jumping in and telling them how much time you want them to spend, or they can spend, or they could spend, or they might spend, or how busy they are, ask the question. If you were to do something like this, how many would you be looking for something full-time or part-time? And if they say part-time, then define that a little bit more. You know, part-time varies from 10 to 15 hours all the way up to 30 to 38 hours. If you ask somebody who's working another job, they're part-time and they may work 38 hours a month, or excuse me, 38 hours a week. So ask what that looks like, and then tailor your words to say around the number of hours that they have. So based on your schedule, how many hours do you think you could give our business? And then tailor the rest of your message about income based on what they have to say. I think it's important for you to be very mindful about listening and not just coming up with a presentation. Cost is easy. One of the best things that I can share with you is that compared to a startup, Compared to a brick-and-mortar startup, the cost of a direct selling business is a fraction of that cost, a decimal fraction of that cost. And I think it's important for you to be able to position it that way. I mean, many of you, the startup cost is less than $500. And when it's that low to start a business that could net them $1 million business or at least $250,000 business in the next couple of years, it would be foolish for you to just say, well, I know cost might be a factor. Don't pussyfoot around it. You know, and if cost is an issue for someone to get started, then you might want to ask them who they could borrow the money from or when they could get started. Or you might want to stop and say, if they can't afford a kit, do I want them in my business? If they can't afford a kit, how can I help them to earn the money to get that kit? So it's up to you totally, but I think those words probably are very helpful for you when it comes to cost. Now, how to get started. I think the easiest word choices that I can teach you, because you have to decide very clearly in your business, what are the next steps that I want somebody to take? How do they get started? Because there's a variety of ways that some of you start people online, some of you start people with a paper application. That depends on your company. But I think in general, you can tell them it's as easy as ABC. A stands for application. You know, in some way, shape, or form, you're going to have them sign an application. B stands for start building a list of clients, of future team members. So begin to build a list. And then C is to begin to contact and give them the information that they need to be able to contact people. That's how simple it is to get started. And so if you can teach your team, or if you're not using that yourself, that getting started is as simple as ABC. Application, build a list, and begin to contact people. Those are simple words to say that anybody can make them their words. Wouldn't you agree, Neil?
I agree. And that's really the important thing when it comes to finding the words to say, is to find the ones that really fit the person you're talking with.
What? So scratch their itch.
Yes. I love that acronym. Well, so the first reason is we don't recruit well is because of our fear. And we start to address that one by trying to hold those emotions in a box so that we can think through things a little bit more. Second one is I don't know what to say. And we find that by focusing on the people we're talking with and practice, practice, practice. Well, the third issue is I don't find time to recruit, or I don't make the time to recruit. And this is really one of those key things. We may know what to say. We may have our heart in the right place, but we just are so full of busy that we don't make the time to recruit.
Boy, Neil, I can tell you this would be the one. I was never afraid. I was pretty good with words, but this is the part when I started becoming very proactive. And so I'm going to share a couple of time management charts with you that we've used for years with people. If you are a new or emerging leader, if you're on this phone and you're not yet a leader, or if you're a brand new leader, then the way that you spend your time is going to be different from an established leader. And so we've just divided it pretty clearly that about half of your time is going to be spent on your personal sales. About 40% of your time to be effective would be spent on recruiting. And that would be contacting people, doing interviews, getting people enrolled. And then about 10% would be working with new people and with future leaders. So that kind of divides your time up. And let me just make it real practical. Let's say that as a new leader, you only have 10 hours a week. Well, that would mean in those 10 hours, 5 hours you need to spend on your personal sales, 4 hours you need to spend on recruiting, and 1 hour on new and working with new people. If you don't have future leaders yet, developing future leaders. So that would be on a 10-hour week. On a 20-hour week, you could break it down again, and that would be 10 hours working on your personal sales. 40% would be, oh, I'm not good at math, Neil, here, 5 hours, no, 6, 7, 8 hours. 40% would be 8 hours on recruiting, and then 10%, 2 hours on working with new and future leaders. Now, if you are an existing leader, you already have some leaders. And so this is what looks different, is your work of your leader. And I would just draw attention to this, that you notice that half of it still, if you draw a line down the middle, 50% of your time or half of your time is still on your personal business and your recruiting. So putting those things into your schedule, being aware of that, successful leaders still spend about half of their time doing those two things. The shift is that you're going to spend 40% of your time working with your new people and your future leaders, probably not on just selling, but also on recruiting. And then 10% of your time is going to be spent working with your existing leaders. And unfortunately, what a lot of people do is they shift this and they get real busy spending 40 to 50% of their time with their existing leaders, and they wonder why they don't grow. And that clearly, this will draw it out. So based on a 30-hour work week, let's translate this. In a 30-hour work week, that would mean that you would spend 30% or 9 hours on your personal business, 20% or 6 hours on recruiting, and that's your personal recruiting, continuing to welcome people into the business. 40% of your time, which would be 12 hours, would be spent working with new people and future leaders, and that would be predominantly working to help them move up. And then 10% or 3 hours a week, which would be spent working with your existing leaders, coaching them and working with them. The key piece, I think, is that you write it down. You know, many of you put appointments in your book, you put things that you have to do in your date book, whether you use an electronic or a paper calendar like you see here. But the problem is that's not proactive. That's not scheduling time. So it's not good enough just to have appointments. You also need to be proactive and schedule time. And there's an old saying that the shortest pencil is longer than the longest memory. And so by writing things down and being proactive and putting them in, it not only unclogs your brain, but it helps you to see, oh, you know what? This is really important for me to do, and I need to look at my schedule and see if it adequately reflects the time that I've set out to grow my business. So spending time on recruiting is that third piece that many of you, that's the reason you don't have more people in your business, is because literally you don't make time to work on it. Now, this has probably kind of whetted your appetite and said, wow, there's so much about this, and we do have so much more about it. Neil and I have developed a 6-week summer series that's kind of like a boot camp called Cracking the Recruiting Code. And stay tuned, because you're going to hear a little bit more about what's involved with that. First of all, these are going to be live, just like today, but also recorded. So in case you miss one, or if you can't make it at the time slot that we have live, you're going to have access to all 6 of these classes. And there's going to be supplemental worksheets, bonus worksheets that you get, like the one you're going to get today, but bonus worksheets throughout this 6-week period. And really, we're going to really dig in, find out what kind of recruiter you are, who are your viable leads, how to get the interview and what's missing, why you don't have more interviews, how to create an effective recruiting conversation. And there will be lots of word choices in week 4 and 5, what to say, what not to say. And then finally, when and how do I close and follow up? Lots of word choices, lots of practical hands-on ideas that we hope will support you in your effort to be a recruiter. Now, we ask people, how much should we charge for that? And
we got one other thing first, though, Dana.
You sure can.
Because these will be structured a little bit differently than this one. We'll have a half hour where we talk about the topic.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Then what we'll do is we'll shut off the recording, and you'll have 15 minutes, and we can do a Q&A to talk about any issues that come up during that session. So if you're on the call live, you'll have 30 minutes of material, then 15 minutes of question and answer, so you can get your needs met. So that's an important thing that we think direct sellers really want to be able to adapt to their particular circumstances.
That's true. Thanks, Neil, for reminding me of that. Now, I will tell you that we talked to lots of people, and we took a survey, how much would you be willing to pay for a summer series, and we got answers everywhere from a very low answer to all the way up to $300. And so Neil and I said, what would be fair and what's affordable? Because really, we're not in this to become millionaires. We've already made lots of money, but we said, you know, what is giving them great value for their money? Because when you pay for something, we all know you take it a little more seriously. So we thought we'll make the classes $89 for 6 classes, and we'll do an early bird. And Neil, do you know when that early bird ends? It's like June.
It's the beginning of June.
Beginning of June, and that's $69. So that's 6 classes for $69. But because you're here, and wait, because you're here on this call, you're going to get all 6 of these classes, not for $89, not for $69, but for only $59, and watch for an email, because this offer is only good for 48 hours. You'll get a bonus worksheet. you'll receive the email with a link to sign up for the 6-week series for only $59. That's less than $10 a class. And we believe that giving you over 30% off for attending this class today, for listening to the recording, and signing up in the next 48 hours is a value for each and every one of you. So I want to just take a moment to review and thank you so much for being on the call today. What's the reason? What's holding you back? Is it fear? Do you need to set some time aside to really address that fear and start changing the way you think about recruiting? Or is it that you don't have the words to say and you need to educate yourself and get better at words to say and begin practicing those words to say? Or finally, go ahead.
There's a lot of questions starting to pop up about when is it and that sort of thing. And let me just say, watch for that email. They'll be on Tuesdays at 10:30 Central, starting, I think, June 10th. So, but all of the details will be in the email. It'll take you to a web page with more details as well.
Right.
And,
well,
they're recorded, so if you can't be there live, you can get the recordings. Go
right.
ahead.
We did do the recordings, yeah. And we picked mornings because that's really, when we asked questions, that's when you said you wanted them was in the morning. And I think you'll be able to take this information and that you learn in cracking the recruiting code and be able to truly, I believe, be able to take this information and share it with your teams and really drill it down so that you can not only have everybody speaking the same language and have people dealing with their fears, have people knowing words to say, knowing how much time that they should spend on it, that I think really and truly it's going to be able to develop a very strong recruiting culture for you. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody that's been on the call. I would invite you to make time in your schedule this summer, a half an hour a week for 6 weeks to really get down and become very focused on being proactive and cracking that recruiting code. So thanks, everybody, for being on the call. We promised you 30 minutes, and we are out of here. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thanks for being here.